The door to the small wooden church slammed open with such force that the hinges groaned, and every head in the congregation turned to see the mountain man standing in the doorway like an avenging angel carved from granite and fury. Delia Katherine stood frozen at the altar, her hands trembling in the crushing grip of Mayor Thornton, who held her wrist with fingers that felt like iron manacles. The preacher had paused mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open as he stared at the massive figure silhouetted against the harsh Arizona sun streaming through the doorway. It was the spring of 1878, and Holbrook, Arizona, was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered along the Little Colorado River, a town built on cattle and survival in equal measure. The mountain man stepped inside, and Delia felt her breath catch despite the terror coursing through her veins. He was easily 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the narrow aisle between the pews. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders in waves that suggested he spent more time in the wilderness than in civilized society. A thick beard covered his jaw, but it could not hide the hard set of his mouth or the dangerous glint in his dark eyes. He wore buckskin trousers and a simple cotton shirt that strained across his chest with every breath, and a gun belt sat low on his hips with the easy familiarity of a man who knew how to use the weapon it carried. "This wedding is not happening," the mountain man said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying to every corner of the small church with the kind of authority that made men listen whether they wanted to or not. Mayor Thornton's face flushed an ugly shade of purple. He was a portly man in his 50s, with thinning hair slicked back with pomade and a suit that cost more than most families in Holbrook earned in a year. He had arrived in town 6 months ago with a deed to half the land around the settlement and ambitions that grew larger with each passing week. "Who the hell do you think you are, barging into a private ceremony?" "Xander Morrison," the mountain man replied, taking another step forward. The floorboards creaked under his weight. "And this is not a private ceremony when the whole town has been forced to attend and bear witness to something that should not be." Delia found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Please, I do not want this. I never wanted this." The mayor's grip on her wrist tightened painfully, and she bit back a gasp. "You hush now, girl. We had an agreement." "You had an agreement with yourself," Xander said, his eyes fixing on where Thornton held Delia. "Let her go. This is my bride, and we are getting married today." Thornton turned to the preacher, a nervous man named Reverend Collins, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. "Continue with the ceremony." Delia had known this day was coming for 3 weeks, ever since her father had stumbled home drunk and told her what he had done. Samuel Kenton had gambled away everything they owned, including the small ranch that had been in their family since they arrived in Arizona territory 5 years ago. He had betted all on a card game against Mayor Thornton, and when he lost, Thornton had offered him a way out: marry his daughter to the mayor, and all debts would be forgiven. Her father had agreed without even asking her. She had tried to run, but Holbrook was small, and there was nowhere to go. The desert stretched for miles in every direction, unforgiving and deadly to those who did not know its secrets. Thornton's men had found her within hours and brought her back, and her father had locked her in a room until this morning when they dragged her to the church in the dress Thornton had provided. Now she stood at the altar in white lace that felt like a burial shroud, watching as this stranger defied the most powerful man in town on her behalf. Xander moved faster than a man his size should have been able to. He closed the distance between himself and the altar in 3 long strides, and his hand shot out to grip Thornton's wrist. I said, "Let her go." There was a moment of struggle, and then Thornton cried out and released Delia's arm. She stumbled backward, rubbing at the red marks his fingers had left on her pale skin. "You are making a mistake," Thornton hissed, cradling his wrist. "I own this town. I can make your life very difficult." "You do not own me," Xander replied. He turned to look at Delia, and his expression softened fractionally. "Miss, I'm offering you a choice. You can marry this man if that is truly what you want, and I will walk out of here and never speak of this again. Or you can walk out that door with me right now, and I will make sure you are never forced into something against your will again." Delia stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She did not know this man. She had never seen him before in her life. But she looked into his eyes and saw something there that she had not seen in anyone since her mother died 2 years ago. She saw someone who cared whether she lived or died, whether she was happy or miserable. "I want to leave," she whispered. Xander extended his hand to her. "Then come with me." She placed her trembling fingers in his palm, and his hand closed around hers with surprising gentleness, given the size and obvious strength of it. Together, they turned toward the door. "Stop them!" Thornton shouted. "Someone stop them right now!" But no one moved. The congregation consisted mostly of townsfolk who had been coerced into attending, and while they feared Thornton's power, there was something about the mountain man that suggested challenging him would be a very poor decision. Delia saw her father slumped in one of the front pews, his face in his hands, too much of a coward to even look at her. They walked down the aisle together, Xander keeping himself between Delia and the crowd, a human shield of muscle and determination. When they reached the doorway, bright sunlight flooded over them, and Delia took her first deep breath in what felt like weeks. Outside, a massive horse waited, a dark bay with intelligent eyes and a patient demeanor despite the commotion. Xander led her to the animal, and in one smooth motion lifted her up onto the saddle as if she weighed nothing at all. Then he swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to grip the reins, and she found herself pressed against his broad chest. "Hold on," he said quietly, and then they were moving. The horse carried them out of Holbrook at a steady pace, not running but not dawdling either. Delia looked back once to see Thornton standing in the church doorway, his face twisted with rage, but they were already too far away for him to do anything about it. They rode for what felt like hours, though the sun had barely moved in the sky. Delia did not speak, and neither did Xander. She tried to process what had just happened, how her life had changed in the span of minutes. She'd gone from being trapped in a nightmare to riding through the Arizona wilderness with a stranger who had saved her without asking for anything in return. Eventually, Xander guided the horse off the main trail and into a narrow canyon that cut through the red rock landscape. The walls rose high on either side, providing shade and shelter from the relentless sun. They followed the canyon deeper into the wilderness until it opened into a small valley where a creek ran clear and cold over smooth stones. A cabin sat near the water, built from logs that had been carefully fitted together and chinked with mud. It was simple but sturdy, with a small corral beside it where 2 more horses grazed. Smoke rose from the chimney in a lazy spiral, suggesting someone else was there. Xander dismounted and reached up to help Delia down. His hands spanned her waist completely as he lifted her from the saddle and set her gently on the ground. Up close, she realized just how large he truly was. The top of her head barely reached his shoulder, and she had to tilt her face up to meet his eyes. "This is my home," he said. "You are safe here. Thornton and his men will not find this place, and even if they did, they would not get past me." "Why did you help me?" Delia asked. Her voice was steadier now, though her hands still shook slightly. "You do not know me." Xander was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "I was in town to trade some furs. I heard people talking about the mayor forcing some girl to marry him to cover her father's debts. I went to the church to see if it was true, and when I saw you standing there, saw the look in your eyes," he trailed off, his jaw tightening. "No one should be forced into marriage. No one should be treated like property to be bought and sold." Before Delia could respond, the cabin door opened and a young boy emerged, maybe 10 or 11 years old, with sandy hair and curious eyes. "Xander, you are back! Did you get—" He stopped when he saw Delia, his eyes going wide. "This is Tommy," Xander said. "I found him living in the mountains about a year ago after his family's wagon was attacked. He has been staying with me since then." "Hello," Delia said softly. Tommy recovered from his surprise and gave her a gap-toothed grin. "Hello, miss. Are you staying for supper? Xander taught me how to make a real good stew." "If she wants to stay, she's welcome to," Xander said. He looked at Delia again. "I meant what I said. You have a choice. You can stay here as long as you need to figure out what you want to do next, or I can take you somewhere else, help you get to another town where Thornton cannot reach you. This is not about what I want. This is about giving you the freedom to decide your own future." Delia felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. When was the last time someone had asked her what she wanted? When was the last time anyone had given her a choice about anything? I would like to stay if you truly do not mind, just for a little while, until I can think clearly. Stay as long as you need, Xander replied. He glanced down at the wedding dress she still wore, the white lace already dusty from the ride. Tommy, see if you can find some clothes that might fit the lady, something more practical than that dress. Tommy nodded eagerly and disappeared back into the cabin. Xander gestured toward the creek. There's a spot just around that bend where you can wash up and change in private. I will take care of the horse and start on dinner. Delia made her way to the creek, her mind still spinning. The water was cool and clear, fed by snowmelt from the mountains that rose in the distance. She knelt beside it and cupped her hands, bringing the water to her face. It felt like washing away the morning's terror, the weeks of dread, the feeling of being trapped with no way out. Tommy appeared a few minutes later with an armful of clothes. These might be a bit big, but they are the smallest things Xander has. I am still too little for my clothes to fit you. He set them on a nearby rock and darted away again, giving her privacy. The clothes were indeed too large. The shirt hung on her like a sack, and she had to roll the trouser legs up several times to keep from tripping. But they were clean and comfortable, and wearing them made her feel more like a person and less like a doll being dressed up for someone else's purposes. When she returned to the cabin, she found Xander at the outdoor fire pit cooking. He had removed his gun belt and his shirt, and Delia found herself staring at the expanse of his back. His muscles moved under sun-bronzed skin as he worked, and she could see old scars crisscrossing his shoulders and arms, testament to a hard life lived in wild places. He turned when he heard her approach, and something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance and his clothes. They fit well enough, he said, his voice a bit rougher than before. Thank you, she replied, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not owe me anything, Xander said firmly. I did what any decent man should do. But Delia had lived in Holbrook long enough to know that very few men would have done what he did. Most would have looked away, told themselves it was not their business. Xander Morrison had walked into that church knowing he was defying the most powerful man in the territory, and he had done it anyway. They ate dinner together, the three of them sitting on logs around the fire as the sun began to set. Tommy chattered happily about his day, telling Delia about the fish he had caught in the creek and the tracks he had found that morning. Xander listened with patient attention, occasionally asking questions or offering observations about the wildlife in the area. Delia found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. There was something peaceful about this place, something that felt safe despite being miles from civilization, or perhaps because they were miles from civilization, away from men like Thornton who wielded power like a weapon. When darkness fell, Xander showed her to the cabin's small second room. This is Tommy's room, but he can sleep out here with me tonight. You take the bed. I cannot take his room, Delia protested. It is already decided, Tommy said cheerfully. Xander and I sleep under the stars sometimes anyway. It is more fun. Delia did not have the energy to argue. She thanked them both and closed the door, then sat on the narrow bed and let herself feel everything she had been holding back. Tears came, hot and fast, tears of relief and fear and confusion all mixed together. She cried for the life she had lost, for the father who had betrayed her, for the terrifying future that had almost been hers. But she also cried because someone had cared enough to save her. A stranger had risked everything to give her a choice, and that simple act of kindness felt more valuable than all the gold in the territory. The next morning, Delia woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood. She dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes and stepped outside to find Xander working, his movements efficient and powerful as he reduced logs to firewood. Sweat gleamed on his skin despite the early hour, and she could not help but notice the way his muscles flexed with each swing of the axe. "Good morning," she called out, and he paused, turning to face her. "Morning. There's coffee and some bread left over from last night inside. Help yourself." Delia found the food and ate, then looked around for something useful to do. She was not accustomed to being idle, and sitting around feeling sorry for herself would not change anything. She noticed that the cabin, while clean, had the slightly chaotic organization of men living without a woman's touch. She began tidying, organizing the shelves, sweeping the floor. When Xander came inside to refill his water canteen, he stopped short. "You do not have to do that." I want to, Delia said. I need to do something. I cannot just sit around while you and Tommy work. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but if you need rest, take it. You have been through a lot. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Xander would hunt or trap, check his snares, tend to the horses in the small garden he maintained. Tommy would fish or help with chores, his boundless energy keeping things lively. And Delia would cook and clean, and slowly feel the knots of tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She learned that Xander had lived in these mountains for nearly 8 years, ever since leaving his family's farm in Missouri after both his parents died. He had come west looking for something, though he never quite articulated what, and had found a kind of peace in the wilderness. He traded furs and occasionally worked as a guide for travelers, but mostly he kept to himself. "Do you ever get lonely?" Delia asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Tommy had already fallen asleep inside, exhausted from a day of playing in the creek. Xander considered the question. "Sometimes. But I prefer my own company to being around people who only care about what they can get from you. Out here, things are simple. If I work hard, I eat. If I prepare properly, I survive the winter. There are no games, no lies." "I understand that," Delia said quietly. "My mother used to say that the hardest thing about living in a town was all the pretending. Everyone pretending to be better than they are, pretending to care about things they do not really care about." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was." Delia stared into the flames. "She died from fever 2 years ago. After that, my father started drinking more and more. I think he could not stand to be in the house without her. It reminded him of what he had lost." "That is no excuse for what he did to you," Xander said, his voice hard. "No," Delia agreed. "It is not." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness around them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the horses shifted in their corral. "What will you do?" Xander asked finally. "When you are ready to leave here, I mean. Do you have family elsewhere? Friends who might take you in?" Delia had been thinking about that question for days. The truth was she had nowhere to go. Her mother's family had disapproved of her marriage to Samuel Kenton and had cut off contact years ago. She had no siblings, no close friends who would risk Thornton's wrath by harboring her. "I do not know," she admitted. "I suppose I could try to find work in another town, maybe as a housekeeper or a cook." "You are a good cook," Xander said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Tommy has been eating twice as much since you started making meals." Delia felt herself smile in return, the expression feeling foreign after weeks of misery. "He is a growing boy. And you work hard enough that you need proper meals, too." Xander's dark eyes caught the firelight, and for a moment, something passed between them, something warm and uncertain and new. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow I need to ride out to check the traps further up the mountain. I will be gone most of the day." "Will it be safe for Tommy and me here alone?" "No one knows about this place except a few trusted friends who would never betray my location." "You will be fine." "But there is a rifle above the door, just in case. Do you know how to shoot?" "My father taught me when I was young," Delia said, "before he became more interested in the bottom of a bottle than his responsibilities." "Good. I do not think you will need it, but it is better to be prepared." That night, lying in Tommy's small bed, Delia thought about the mountain man who had saved her. Xander Morrison was unlike any man she had ever known. He was strong and capable, yet gentle with Tommy and respectful with her. He had given her shelter and safety without asking for anything in return, without making her feel like she owed him. And he was handsome, in a rugged, untamed way that made her heart do strange things in her chest. She told herself not to be foolish. He had helped her because he was a good man, not because he had any special feelings toward her. Once she figured out where to go and what to do with her life, she would leave, and he would go back to his solitary existence in the mountains. But the thought of leaving made her chest ache in a way she did not want to examine too closely. The next morning, Xander left before dawn. Delia woke to find him already gone, his horse missing from the corral. She made breakfast for herself and Tommy, and they spent the day doing chores around the cabin. Tommy showed her his favorite fishing spot and told her stories about his life before he met Xander, about the family he had lost and how scared he had been until the mountain man found him. "He saved me," Tommy said simply, "just like he saved you." He seems to make a habit of it, Delia replied softly. Xander says that if you have the power to help someone and you do not, then you are no better than the people hurting them. He says that good men stand up even when it is hard. Delia felt her throat tighten. He is right. The sun was beginning to set when they heard the sound of horses approaching. Delia's heart jumped into her throat, fear flooding through her. Xander had said no one knew about this place, but what if Thornton had somehow tracked them? What if he had brought his men? Get inside, she told Tommy urgently. Stay away from the windows. She grabbed the rifle from above the door, checking to make sure it was loaded. Her hands were steadier than she expected as she positioned herself where she could see the approach to the cabin. But the horse that came into view was Xander's bay, and the man on its back was unmistakably him, his broad shoulders and long hair identifying him even from a distance. Delia set the rifle aside, relief making her knees weak. Xander dismounted as she stepped outside, and she saw that he was favoring his left side slightly. What happened? Are you hurt? It is nothing, he said, but she could see blood on his shirt. It is not nothing. Come inside and let me look at it. He started to protest, but she gave him a look that brooked no argument. Xander sighed and followed her into the cabin, with Tommy hovering anxiously nearby. Sit, Delia ordered, pointing to a chair. Xander obeyed, and she carefully unbuttoned his shirt to reveal a long gash across his ribs. It was not deep, but it was bleeding steadily. What did this? Mountain Lion took exception to me checking the traps near her den. We had a disagreement about territory. A disagreement, Delia repeated, trying not to think about what could have happened if the wound had been a few inches deeper. You could have been killed. But I was not, Xander said, his eyes finding hers. I am fine, Delia. It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his deep voice made her pulse quicken. She busied herself with cleaning and bandaging the wound, trying to ignore how warm his skin was under her fingers, how the muscles of his abdomen tensed when she touched him. You need to be more careful, she said quietly as she tied off the bandage. I am always careful, but the wilderness does not care about careful. Things happen. Then maybe you should not go out there alone. Xander caught her hand as she started to pull away, his large fingers wrapping around her smaller ones. Are you worried about me? Delia met his gaze and saw something there that made her breath catch. Yes, she admitted. I'm worried about you. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands clasped, something unspoken building between them. Then Tommy cleared his throat loudly, breaking the spell, and they both pulled back. I will start dinner, Delia said, her cheeks warm. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted between Delia and Xander. They talked more, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. She learned that he had wanted to be a school teacher once, before life took him in a different direction. He learned that she had dreamed of seeing the ocean someday, of traveling beyond the desert and mountains that had defined her whole world. They worked side by side, Delia helping with outdoor chores, while Xander taught her about tracking and reading the signs of the wilderness. He showed her which plants were edible and which were poisonous, how to tell if water was safe to drink, where to find shelter if caught in a sudden storm. And slowly, inevitably, she began to fall in love with him. It was in the little things, the way he always made sure she had enough food before serving himself, how he would position himself between her and any potential danger without even thinking about it. The gentle patience he showed with Tommy, teaching the boy skills that would serve him for the rest of his life. The rare smiles that transformed his serious face into something beautiful. But she did not know if he felt the same way. He was protective and kind, but he treated her with the same courtesy he showed everyone. She told herself it did not matter, that she was grateful for his help and should not expect anything more. Then, one evening, everything changed. They had been sitting by the fire after dinner, and Tommy had gone to bed early, worn out from a day of helping Xander repair the corral fence. Delia was mending one of Xander's shirts, the one he had torn on the mountain lion encounter, when he spoke. I have been thinking, he said, his voice low and serious, about what happens next. Delia's hands stilled on the fabric. What do you mean? You have been here almost a month now. Thornton has probably stopped actively searching for you, but that does not mean you can go back to Holbrook. He is not the kind of man who forgets a slight, and you humiliated him in front of the whole town. I know, Delia said quietly. She had been trying not to think about the future, about the fact that this peaceful interlude could not last forever. I could take you to Prescott or Flagstaff, help you get settled somewhere new. With my connections, I could find you honest work, somewhere safe where Thornton's reach does not extend. The thought of leaving made Delia's chest ache. Is that what you want? For me to leave? Xander was quiet for so long that she thought he was not going to answer. Then he stood abruptly and walked to the edge of the firelight, his back to her. What I want and what is right are two different things. What do you want, Xander? Delia set aside her mending and stood, moving toward him. I want? He stopped, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. I have no right to want anything from you. I pulled you out of one bad situation. I will not put you into another by expecting something just because I gave you shelter. Is that what you think? Delia moved around to face him, tilting her head back to look into his eyes. That I would feel obligated to you? Would you not? I hold all the power here, Delia. You are dependent on me for food, for safety, for everything. How could anything between us be equal? She understood then what he was trying to say, why he had been so careful to maintain distance between them, despite the growing connection she felt. He was trying to protect her, even from himself. Dana for her. Xander Morrison, she said firmly, I'm grateful for everything you have done for me. But gratitude is not why my heart races when you smile. It is not why I find myself looking for you whenever you leave. It is not why the thought of going to another town and never seeing you again makes me want to cry. His eyes widened, something like hope flickering in their depths. Delia. I am not some helpless girl who does not know her own mind, she continued. Yes, you saved me. Yes, you gave me shelter. But I have stayed here, in this cabin, working alongside you because I wanted to, because being here with you makes me happier than I have been in years. If you want me to leave because you do not care for me, then say so. But do not make that choice for me because you think it is what is best. Xander stared at her for a long moment, and then his hand came up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. You have no idea how much I care for you, he said roughly. From the moment I saw you in that church, looking so scared and so brave all at once, I knew I would do anything to keep you safe. And every day since, every conversation, every shared meal, every time you laugh at something Tommy says, I fall a little more in love with you. Delia's breath caught. You love me? God help me, I do. I love you, Delia Kenton. But I need you to be sure. I need to know that this is what you really want, not just because you feel safe here or because you think you owe me something. I am sure, Delia said, her hand coming up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. I love you, Xander. I choose you, not because you saved me, but because of who you are. Because you are strong and kind, and you see me as a person, not property. Because when I imagine my future, you are in it. Xander made a sound low in his throat, and then he was kissing her. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving her a chance to pull away. But Delia pressed closer, her hands gripping the fabric of his shirt as she kissed him back with all the emotion that had been building inside her for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. I will take care of you, he promised, for the rest of my life, if you will let me. And I will take care of you, Delia replied. You do not have to be alone anymore, Xander. Neither of us has to be alone. They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and Delia felt something settle in her soul. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, not just safety or shelter, but a true home, a place where she was valued and loved for who she was. The next morning, Tommy came out of the cabin to find them sitting close together by the fire, Xander's arm around Delia's shoulders. The boy stopped short, his eyes going wide, and then a huge grin split his face. Does this mean Delia is staying forever? If she wants to, Xander said, looking at her with such warmth in his eyes that she felt it down to her toes. I want to, Delia confirmed. Tommy let out a whoop of joy and launched himself at them, nearly knocking them both over in his enthusiasm. They laughed, the three of them tangled together, and Delia thought about how strange life was. A month ago, she had been at her lowest point, trapped and terrified. Now she had a family, unconventional as it might be. But there was still the matter of Mayor Thornton to deal with. Xander brought it up later that day when Tommy was fishing down by the creek. He will not stop looking for you. Men like him do not handle being defied well. Eventually, he will figure out where you are, or he will make life difficult for anyone he thinks might be helping you. What do we do? Delia asked. We could leave Arizona altogether, go north to Colorado or Montana, start fresh where no one knows us. Delia considered it. The idea of running did not sit well with her, but neither did putting Xander and Tommy in danger because of her. Would you do that? Leave your home? Home is not a place, Xander said, taking her hand. It is people. You and Tommy, you are my home now. I would go anywhere to keep you safe. Before she could respond, they heard the sound of multiple horses approaching fast. Xander was on his feet instantly, his hand going to his gun. Get inside with Tommy, now! Delia ran to the creek and grabbed Tommy, pulling him toward the cabin even as riders emerged from the canyon entrance. She counted at least 6 men, and at the front rode Mayor Thornton, his face twisted with rage. "Xander Morrison!" Thornton called out, reining his horse to a stop. "I knew you had her. Give me back my bride and we can settle this peacefully." "She was never your bride," Xander replied, his stance relaxed but ready. "And she is not going anywhere with you. I will give you one chance to surrender her. Do it now, and I will only have you arrested for kidnapping. Refuse, and I will see you hanged." "You will try," Xander said calmly. Delia's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She could see the guns the men carried, could see the cold determination in Thornton's eyes. If this turned into a fight, Xander would be outnumbered 6-1. She made a decision. Stepping out of the cabin, she called out, "Wait, do not hurt him. This is not his fault." "Delia, no," Xander said urgently, but she ignored him. "I will make you a deal, Mayor Thornton," she said, walking toward the men with more confidence than she felt. "You want to hurt someone for the embarrassment I caused you. So hurt me. But leave Xander and Tommy alone. They did nothing wrong." "You think you are in a position to make deals?" Thornton sneered. "I think you are in a position where if you try to take me by force, Xander will fight you, and I think he will kill at least half your men before you bring him down. Is that worth it? Is your pride worth that much blood?" Thornton's eyes narrowed. "What are you proposing?" "Let me talk to Xander for a moment. Give us that much. Then I will tell you my decision, and everyone can walk away from this without violence." Thornton considered, then nodded curtly. "You have 5 minutes." Delia walked back to where Xander stood, his whole body tense. "What are you doing?" he demanded in a low voice. "Saving your life," she replied. "If you fight them, you will die. I cannot let that happen, and I cannot let you go back with him. Delia, you know what kind of man he is. He will make your life hell just to punish you for running. Then we need to find another way." She grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at her. "Trust me. Please, Xander, trust me." Something in her voice must have convinced him, because he gave a sharp nod. Delia turned back to Thornton and raised her voice so everyone could hear. "My father made a deal with you using me as payment for his debts, correct?" "That is correct," Thornton said warily. "And those debts? They totaled how much?" $3,000 in cash and property." Delia took a deep breath. "Then I will get you $3,000, but I will not marry you, and you will leave me alone. You will consider the debt paid in full, and you will have no claim on me or my father ever again." Thornton laughed harshly. "You do not have $3,000. You have nothing." "Give me 1 year," Delia said. 1 year to earn the money and pay you back. If I succeed, you leave us alone. If I fail, then I will return with you to Holbrook and marry you with no further protest." "This is insane," Xander said beside her, but she squeezed his hand, silently asking him to let her finish. "Why would I agree to that?" Thornton asked. "I could just take you now." "Because in 1 year, you might actually get your money back. Take me now, and you get a wife who hates you and will make every day of your life miserable. Plus, you make an enemy of the man standing beside me, and somehow I do not think that ends well for you either." There was a long moment of tense silence. Then one of Thornton's men spoke up, a weathered older fellow with a scar across his cheek. "Boss, 3,000 in cash is better than an unwilling bride, and the whole town knows she does not want you. This way, you look reasonable instead of like a tyrant." Thornton's jaw worked as he considered. Finally he said, 1 year. But if you are even 1 day late or $1 short, you come back to Holbrook and you marry me. And if you run, if you try to leave the territory, the deal is off and I will hunt you down. Understood?" "Understood," Delia said. "Then we have an agreement." Thornton wheeled his horse around. "I will be seeing you in 1 year, Miss Kenton. Do not disappoint me." They rode out, dust rising in their wake. Delia waited until they were completely out of sight before her knees gave out. Xander caught her, his strong arms pulling her against his chest. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, his voice rough with emotion. "A year to earn $3,000? Delia, that is impossible." "It is not impossible," she said, pulling back to look at him. "It is difficult, but not impossible. We can do it together. Even if we could, I would never ask you to work like that, to sacrifice that much. You are not asking. I am choosing. Xander, this is the only way we can have a life together without constantly looking over our shoulders. I need to pay this debt to be free of my father's mistakes once and for all." Xander cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "Then we do it together. All of us. But Delia, if we cannot make it, if we run out of time, you are not going back to him. I will take you somewhere he can never find you before I let that happen." "We will not run out of time," Delia said with more confidence than she felt. "We are going to earn that money, pay off the debt, and build the life we want." "I believe it." Tommy came running up then, having stayed back during the confrontation. "What happened? Are they gone?" "They are gone," Xander confirmed, "but we have work to do, a lot of work." Over the next few weeks, they formulated a plan. Xander would increase his hunting and trapping, taking on more dangerous territories that others avoided. Delia would make use of her cooking skills, smoking and preserving meat that Xander could sell in various towns along with the furs. Tommy, despite his youth, would help with tanning hides and maintaining the camp, but they quickly realized it would not be enough. Even working from dawn until late into the night, the math did not add up. They needed something more, something that would bring in larger amounts of money faster. The answer came from an unexpected source. A traveling merchant named Ezra passed through their valley, lost and looking for the main trail. Xander gave him directions and invited him to share their evening meal. Over dinner, Ezra mentioned that he was struggling to find reliable guides for groups of Eastern settlers and investors who wanted to see the Arizona wilderness. "People want the adventure of the West, but they want to be safe doing it," Ezra explained. "They will pay good money for someone who knows the land, who can keep them from getting lost or killed. The problem is, most men with those skills do not want to deal with pampered Easterners." Xander and Delia exchanged looks. "How much money are we talking about?" Delia asked. "Depends on the length of the trip and the danger involved, but for a week-long expedition, anywhere from $200 to $500, more if the group is large or the client particularly wealthy." That night, after Ezra had left, they talked long into the darkness. Guiding expeditions could bring in the kind of money they needed, but it would mean Xander leaving for extended periods. It would mean risk, both from the wilderness and from potentially encountering Thornton's men or people who might report back to him. "I do not like the idea of leaving you and Tommy alone that much," Xander said. "And I do not like the idea of you taking on extra danger," Delia replied. "But we need the money, and this might be our best chance." They decided to try it. Xander contacted some of his trading connections and let it be known that he was available for guiding work. Within 2 weeks, he had his first job, a wealthy businessman from New York who wanted to hunt elk in the high country. The night before Xander was set to leave, Delia could not sleep. She lay awake listening to the sounds of the night, anxiety churning in her stomach. What if something happened to him? What if he did not come back? She slipped out of bed and found him sitting by the dying fire, staring into the embers. He looked up when he heard her approach, a question in his eyes. "I'm worried," she admitted, sitting beside him. "So am I," Xander replied, pulling her close. "Not about the guiding work. I've navigated these mountains in blizzards and through territories with hostile animals. I can handle rich Easterners, but I'm worried about leaving you. What if Thornton comes back? Then Tommy and I will manage. You taught me how to shoot, how to track, how to find shelter. We will be all right." "You are stronger than you know," Xander said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "When I first saw you in that church, I thought you needed saving, but I was wrong. You would have found a way out eventually, with or without me. You have a spine of steel, Delia Kenton. I only found my strength because you showed me it was there, she replied. She turned in his arms so she could see his face. Come back to me, Xander Morrison. Whatever happens out there, come back to me. Always, he promised, and then he kissed her with a fierce tenderness that made her forget, just for a moment, all the challenges that lay ahead. Xander left at dawn, riding out with his wealthy client and 2 pack horses loaded with supplies. Delia and Tommy stood watching until they disappeared from view, and then they got to work. The days passed slowly. Delia kept herself busy with the endless chores of frontier life, smoking meat, tending the garden, maintaining the cabin. Tommy was a surprising help, his energy and enthusiasm making the work go faster. But at night, alone in the bed, Delia found herself listening for the sound of hoofbeats that would signal Xander's return. He was gone for 12 days, 3 longer than expected. When he finally rode into the valley, Delia ran to meet him, relief flooding through her so powerfully that her eyes stung with tears. Xander dismounted and caught her up in his arms, lifting her off her feet as he held her tight. I'm all right, he murmured into her hair. The client wanted to extend the trip, and the extra time meant extra money. I'm sorry I worried you. How much? She asked when he finally set her down. $400. He pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag heavy with coins. He was so pleased with the Elky bag that he gave me a bonus. It was more money than Delia had ever seen in one place. They sat down that night and counted their total savings. With the money from Xander's furs and the guiding job, they had just over $600. It was a start, but they still had a long way to go. Summer deepened into fall, and Xander took on more guiding work. Each time he left, it got a little easier, though Delia never stopped worrying. Between trips, they worked side by side, building up their stores and savings. The money slowly accumulated, a few $100s at a time. They also grew closer, the shared goal and the challenges they faced together, forging a bond that went deeper than simple attraction. Xander taught Delia everything he knew about surviving in the wilderness, and she taught him things too, the value of patience, the importance of hope, even when things seemed impossible. One evening in late October, as the first snow began to fall in the high mountains, Xander surprised her. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Tommy already asleep inside, when he took her hand. I want to marry you, he said without preamble. Not because of any debt or obligation, not because you were staying here, but because I love you and I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Delia's heart swelled. I want to marry you too, but how? We cannot risk going to a town with a proper preacher, not with Thornton's men potentially watching. We do not need a preacher to make vows to each other. The law might not recognize it, but God and we will know what it means. When all this is over, when the debt is paid and we are truly free, we can have a legal ceremony if you want one. But right now, tonight, I want you to be my wife in the way that matters most. Delia felt tears spill over onto her cheeks, but they were happy tears. Yes. Yes, Xander, I will marry you right here, right now, in the way that matters most. They stood together under the stars, hands clasped, and spoke vows to each other. Xander promised to love her and protect her for all his days, to stand by her in times of hardship and joy. Delia promised to love him and support him, to be his partner in building the life they both wanted. There were no witnesses except Tommy, who woke up and peeked out of the cabin to watch with wide eyes and the vast wilderness that surrounded them. But Delia had never felt more married, more bound to another person than she did in that moment. That night, for the first time, they shared a bed as husband and wife. Xander was gentle with her, his touch reverent as he helped her out of her clothes, and then slowly, carefully, made love to her. Delia had been nervous, knowing little about what happened between a man and a woman beyond whispered rumors, and her mother's vague assurances that it would be all right with the right man. Xander was the right man. He made sure of her comfort at every step, his kisses and caresses building a fire in her that she had not known she could feel. When they finally came together, there was a moment of discomfort, but it faded quickly into something else, something powerful and overwhelming and perfect. Afterward, lying in his arms, Delia felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. This was what she had been made for, not to be someone's property or bargaining chip, but to be an equal partner with someone who loved her as much as she loved him. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Xander replied, his arms tightening around her. "My wife." Winter arrived in earnest, and guiding work became scarce. No one wanted to trek through the Arizona mountains in the snow and bitter cold. Xander and Delia used the time to build up their fur supply, working together to check trap lines and preserve the pelts. Tommy continued to grow, shooting up several inches and losing some of the childish roundness in his face. They had $1,400 saved by the time spring arrived. Xander took on more guiding jobs, longer expeditions that sometimes kept him away for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Delia missed him terribly during those trips, but each time he returned safely, and each time he brought more money. Summer came, hot and dry, and they passed the halfway point to their goal. $1,800, $2,000, $2,200. The year deadline loomed larger with each passing month. Then, in late August, disaster struck. Xander was guiding a group through a narrow canyon when a flash flood came through, the result of a sudden storm in the mountains. He managed to get his clients to safety, but 3 of the pack horses were swept away, along with 2 months' worth of carefully preserved furs that Xander had been planning to sell in Prescott. He returned to the valley exhausted and discouraged, with barely $100 to show for 3 weeks of work. When Delia asked about the furs, he had to tell her they were gone. She did not cry, though she wanted to. Instead, she pulled him close and said, "We will figure it out. We still have time." But the truth was, time was running short. They had 3 months left until the deadline, and they were still $800 short of their goal. Even with Xander taking on more work, even with both of them putting every spare moment into earning money, the math did not look good. Delia began to accept that she might have to return to Holbrook, might have to marry Thornton after all. The thought made her sick, but she had given her word. More than that, she would not let Xander or Tommy pay the price for her father's debts. Then, in early September, salvation came from an unexpected source. A group of businessmen from California arrived looking for an expert guide to take them through some of the most dangerous and beautiful parts of the Arizona territory. They wanted to scout potential locations for mining operations, and they were willing to pay a premium for someone who knew the land intimately and could keep them safe. The job would take 6 weeks. It would keep Xander away almost until the deadline, and it paid $1,500. "It is too dangerous," Delia said when Xander told her about the offer. 6 weeks in territory you described as treacherous, with men you do not know and cannot necessarily trust. "It is also our best chance to make the deadline," Xander replied. "With this money, we would have enough to pay Thornton and still have some left over to start building a real life together. Delia, I have to take it." She knew he was right, but the thought of him gone for so long, in such danger, terrified her. "Promise me you will be careful. Promise me you will come back." "I promise," Xander said, pulling her into his arms. "I will always come back to you." They spent his last night before departure, holding each other, neither wanting to sleep and waste their remaining time together. In the morning, Delia helped him pack, checking and rechecking his supplies. Tommy was unusually quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation. "You are in charge while I am gone," Xander told the boy seriously. "You watch over Delia, and you take care of this place. Can you do that?" Tommy nodded, trying to look brave despite the tears in his eyes. "I can do it." Xander embraced him, and Delia saw him whisper something in Tommy's ear that made the boy nod solemnly. Then he turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you," he said simply. "Everything I do for you, for us, for the life we are building together." "I love you too," Delia replied, memorizing every detail of his face. "Come home to me, Xander Morrison. Come home to your wife." He kissed her then, deep and long, pouring everything he felt into it. Then he mounted his horse and rode out without looking back, because they both knew that if he looked back, he might not be able to leave. The weeks that followed were the longest of Delia's life. She and Tommy maintained the cabin and the surrounding land, but time seemed to move at a crawl. Every night she would stand outside and look toward the canyon entrance, willing Xander to appear. 5 weeks passed, then 6. The deadline was only 3 days away when Tommy spotted riders approaching. Delia's heart leaped, but when the figures got closer, she realized it was not Xander. It was Mayor Thornton, accompanied by 2 of his men. Miss Kenton, Thornton said, tipping his hat in a mockery of politeness, just thought I would check in, see how you are progressing on our little agreement. I have 3 more days, Delia said, her hand resting on the rifle she now carried whenever strangers approached. That you do, but I wanted to make sure you had not forgotten. 3 days from now, you either produce $3,000 or you come with me back to Holbrook. Those were the terms. I remember the terms. Thornton looked around the valley, his eyes calculating. Nice place you have here. Shame you might have to leave it. Of course, if you cannot pay, you could always tell me where Morrison keeps his money. I'm sure a man who can afford to turn down jobs in favor of playing family has quite a bit saved up. Xander earned every dollar he has through honest work, Delia said coldly. And even if he had a fortune hidden somewhere, I would not tell you. Loyalty is admirable, if misplaced. Thornton gathered his reins. 3 days, Miss Kenton. I will be waiting at the canyon entrance. Do not be late. They rode out, and Delia felt despair wash over her. Even if Xander returned in time, even if he had earned the full amount from the guiding job, they would barely make it. If he was delayed even by a day, if something had gone wrong, she would have to honor her agreement. Tommy came to stand beside her. He will make it, the boy said with the absolute certainty of childhood. Xander always keeps his promises. Delia wanted to believe him, but as the hours ticked by, her hope faded. 2 days left. 1 day. The morning of the deadline arrived, and there was still no sign of Xander. Delia packed a small bag with the few possessions she had brought with her, her hands shaking. She could not cry, not in front of Tommy, but inside she was breaking. She had been so close to the life she wanted, so close to true freedom and happiness. I am going to meet Thornton, she told Tommy as the sun reached its zenith. You stay here. When Xander gets back, tell him what happened. Tell him not to come after me, that I made this choice and I'm at peace with it. You're lying, Tommy said, tears streaming down his face. You are not at peace with it. No, Delia admitted, hugging him tight. I am not, but sometimes we have to do hard things to protect the people we love. Xander and I could not pay the debt, so I have to honor my word. It is the only way to keep him safe. She left before her resolve could break, walking down the canyon toward the entrance where Thornton would be waiting. Each step felt like she was walking to her own execution. The canyon walls rose high on either side, and she tried to memorize this place, this landscape that had become home. She was halfway to the entrance when she heard it, hoofbeats, fast and urgent, echoing off the canyon walls. She spun around and saw him. Xander was riding toward her at full gallop, his horse lathered with sweat, his long hair flying behind him. He looked exhausted and filthy and more beautiful than anything Delia had ever seen. He reined in beside her and dismounted in one fluid motion, grabbing her shoulders. Are you going to Thornton? Yes, she said, tears now flowing freely. I have to. We are out of time. No, we are not. Xander reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a heavy leather pouch. $1,500, just like they promised. Delia, we did it. We have the money. Delia stared at the pouch, unable to believe it. You made it. You actually made it in time. I pushed hard the last 3 days, barely stopped to rest. I was not going to let you face him alone, and I was not going to let him take you from me. He cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. We are going to end this, right now, together. They rode to the canyon entrance together, Xander holding Delia in front of him on his horse. Thornton was there, waiting, looking smug and satisfied, certain that Delia would have no choice but to come with him. His expression changed to shock when he saw Xander. We have your money, Xander announced, dismounting and helping Delia down. He opened the pouch and began counting out bills and coins onto a flat rock. $3,000, exactly as agreed. The debt is paid in full. Thornton's men counted it carefully, and finally one of them nodded to the mayor. It is all here, boss. So it is, Thornton said, his voice tight with anger. Congratulations, Miss Kenton. It seems you have earned your freedom. Yes, Delia said, standing tall. I have. My father's debt is paid, and you have no claim on me or my family ever again. That was the agreement. That was the agreement, Thornton acknowledged. He picked up the money, but his eyes were cold as they fixed on Xander. You made an enemy today, Morrison. I do not forget things like this. Neither do I, Xander replied, his hand resting casually near his gun. So here is how this is going to work. You are going to take that money and go back to Holbrook. You are going to leave us alone. And if I ever hear that you have tried to harm Delia or her father or anyone connected to us, I will come find you. And when I do, having money and power will not save you. Do we understand each other?" For a moment the tension was thick enough to cut. Then Thornton laughed, though it sounded forced. "Understood. You have my word for what it is worth. The debt is paid, and as far as I am concerned, we never met." He rode out with his men, and Delia sagged against Xander, relief making her weak. It was over. Truly, finally over. "Come on," Xander said gently. "Let us go home." They returned to the cabin to find Tommy bouncing with excitement. When he saw them together, saw the smiles on their faces, he let out a whoop of joy and ran to embrace them both. That night, they celebrated. It was a simple celebration, just the three of them around the fire, but Delia could not remember ever being happier. They had done the impossible, paid off a crushing debt through hard work and determination. They had earned their freedom. More than that, they had built something real, a family, a home, a future. "What happens now?" Tommy asked as they sat watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Now we live," Xander said, his arm around Delia's shoulders. "We build the life we want, without anyone hanging over us, without any debts or obligations except to each other." "I want to make our marriage legal," Delia said. "I want the whole world to know that I am your wife, and you are my husband." "Then we will ride to Prescott next week and find a preacher," Xander agreed. "A real wedding with witnesses and everything official." "Can I be a witness?" Tommy asked eagerly. "You will be the witness," Delia assured him. "You are as much a part of this family as anyone." True to their word, they made the journey to Prescott the following week. It was Delia's first time in a real city, and she found herself overwhelmed by the buildings and crowds. But Xander stayed close, his solid presence grounding her, and Tommy chattered excitedly about everything he saw. They found a church with a kind-eyed minister who agreed to perform the ceremony. Delia wore a simple but pretty dress that Xander bought for her, blue cotton with white lace at the collar. Xander wore new clothes too, dark trousers and a white shirt that made him look almost civilized, though nothing could truly tame the wild edge about him. They spoke their vows again, this time legally binding, with Tommy standing beside them as their witness. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed Delia with such passion that the minister cleared his throat awkwardly, and Tommy giggled. "You are stuck with me now," Delia whispered against Xander's lips. "Exactly where I want to be," he replied. They spent one night in Prescott, staying in a hotel that felt unbearably fancy after months in the cabin. Tommy got his own room for the first time in his life and declared it the most amazing thing ever. Xander and Delia spent the night in their room making love as married people, as partners in every sense of the word. The next morning, they headed back to their valley, to their home. As they rode through the canyon, Delia thought about everything that had happened over the past year. She had gone from a terrified girl being forced to the altar to a woman who had helped earn $3,000 through sheer determination. She had gone from feeling powerless to discovering her own strength. And she had found love, real love, with a man who saw her as an equal and a partner. The months that followed were peaceful. Xander continued to take on guiding work occasionally, but he was more selective now, only accepting jobs that did not keep him away too long or put him in excessive danger. Delia managed their home and helped with the business side of things, keeping books and negotiating prices with traders who passed through. Tommy continued to grow, and they talked seriously about sending him to school in a year or two, giving him opportunities for education and a future beyond the wilderness. And one morning in late spring, nearly 2 years after Xander had stopped her wedding, Delia woke with a strange sensation in her stomach. She barely made it outside before she was sick, and when it happened again the next day and the day after that, she realized what it meant. She was pregnant. She told Xander that evening as they sat by the fire. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and then a slow smile spread across his face. "A baby? We are having a baby?" "Yes," Delia confirmed, laughing at his obvious joy. "In about 6 months, I think." Xander pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "I'm going to be a father. Tommy is going to be a brother. Delia, this is..." He trailed off, overcome with emotion. This is everything I ever wanted, Delia finished for him. A family, a home, people I love who love me back. Tommy was equally excited when they told him. He immediately started making plans for all the things he would teach the baby, all the adventures they would have. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Delia found herself getting more excited with each passing day. The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat made her miserable, and there were days when she felt too sick to do much more than lie in bed. But Xander was endlessly patient, taking over her chores without complaint and making sure she had everything she needed. Tommy helped too, fetching water and keeping her company when Xander had to be away. In late October, as the leaves were turning gold in the high country, Delia went into labor. It was long and painful, and there were moments when she thought she could not bear it. But Xander stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, being the rock she needed. Finally, as dawn broke over the canyon walls, their son was born. He was perfect, with a healthy set of lungs and a surprising amount of dark hair. Xander held him with a mixture of wonder and terror on his face, this massive mountain man reduced to trembling by the tiny life in his arms. "What should we name him?" Delia asked weakly from the bed. Xander looked at her, tears in his eyes. "What about Daniel? After my father." "Daniel Morrison," Delia said, testing the name. "I like it. It is strong and good, like his father." Tommy peeked in cautiously, and Xander beckoned him closer. "Come meet your brother, Tommy." The boy approached slowly, his eyes wide as he looked at the baby. "He's so small. Was I that small once?" "Even smaller," Delia assured him, "but you will help him grow big and strong. Teach him everything Xander taught you." "I will," Tommy promised solemnly. "I will be the best big brother ever." They were a family now, complete and whole. Delia recovered from the birth slowly, and Xander refused to leave her side for more than a few minutes at a time for the first few weeks. He doted on both her and Daniel, changing diapers and walking the floor with the baby at night so Delia could rest. As Daniel grew, he proved to be a happy baby with his father's dark eyes and his mother's smile. Tommy was true to his word and helped constantly, entertaining the baby and fetching things and generally being the protective older brother. The years passed peacefully. Xander's reputation as a guide grew, and they were able to save money and improve their home. They built an addition onto the cabin, giving Tommy his own room and creating a proper nursery for Daniel. When Daniel was 3, Delia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl without complications. They named her Emma, after Delia's mother, and she had her mother's blonde hair and her father's strong will. Tommy was 17 by then, nearly a man himself. He had decided he wanted to be a guide like Xander, and he spent his days learning the skills he would need. Xander taught him with pride, and Delia knew it would not be long before Tommy struck out on his own. But for now, they were all together. Their valley had become a true homestead, with a large garden, several outbuildings, and a string of horses that Xander used for his guiding work. They had built something lasting, something that would endure. One evening, as they all sat around the fire after dinner, Daniel playing with wooden blocks Xander had carved for him, and Emma sleeping in Delia's arms, Xander turned to his wife. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Delia looked around at her family, at the life they had built together through determination and love. She thought about the terrified girl she had been, standing at an altar in a wedding dress, certain her life was over. She thought about the mountain man who had burst through those church doors and offered her a choice, a chance at something better. She thought about everything they had survived and overcome, the challenges they had faced and the victories they had won. "I am more than happy," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I am blessed. I have everything I ever wanted, and so much more than I ever dreamed possible." Xander kissed the top of her head. "So do I. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were special. I knew you were worth fighting for, and every day since has proven me right." "Tell us the story," Daniel piped up from where he sat playing. "Tell us about how you met Mama." It was a story they had heard many times, but they never tired of it. Xander began the tale, describing the day he walked into a church in Holbrook and stopped a wedding. He told them about bringing Delia to the valley, about the year they spent working to pay off her father's debt, about the challenges they overcame. Tommy added his own memories, recalling how scared he had been that Delia would leave, how happy he was when she stayed. Delia shared her perspective, talking about how frightening and exhilarating it was to ride away from her old life and towards something unknown. As the story wound to its conclusion, with their wedding in Prescott and the years that followed, Daniel's eyes were shining with excitement. "You saved Mama from the bad man," he said to Xander with absolute certainty. "You are a hero." "No," Xander said gently. "Your mother saved herself. I just gave her the choice to do so. She is the hero of this story, Daniel. Never forget that." But Delia shook her head. "We saved each other. You gave me the freedom to choose my own path, and I gave you a reason to let someone into your life again. We built this together, all of us." She looked around the fire at her family. Tommy, nearly grown and ready to start his own adventures. Daniel, full of energy and curiosity and joy. Emma, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the legacy of courage and love she had been born into. And Xander, her husband, her partner, the man who had changed her entire world. "This is what matters," she said softly. "Not the fear or the hardship we went through to get here, not the men who tried to control us or the obstacles we faced. What matters is that we are together, that we built something good and true and lasting. We are a family, and nothing can change that." As the fire burned low and the stars emerged overhead, they sat together in comfortable silence. The wilderness stretched around them, vast and wild and beautiful, full of both danger and wonder. But here, in this valley, they had created a haven, a place where love triumphed over fear, where strength came from unity rather than domination, where every person was valued for who they were rather than what they could provide. Years later, when Daniel and Emma had children of their own, they would tell them the story of how their grandfather burst into a church to stop a wedding and offer their grandmother a choice. They would talk about the year of hard work, the debt paid through determination and love, the life built in a hidden valley in the Arizona wilderness. And those children would learn that sometimes the greatest courage comes from offering someone a choice rather than making demands. That true strength lies not in forcing your will on others, but in standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. That love, real love, is built on respect and partnership and the willingness to fight for each other, no matter the cost. But that was all in the future. For now, Delia sat with her family around the fire, Emma warm in her arms, Daniel's laughter filling the air as Xander lifted him up to point out constellations in the night sky, Tommy adding wood to keep the flames burning bright. She was home, she was loved, she was free. And that, Delia thought as she watched the people she loved most in the world, was worth more than all the gold in the territory. Worth more than safety or security or anything else she might have had in a different life. This was her life, the one she had chosen, the one she had fought for. And it was perfect. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of pine and sage and the promise of tomorrow. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon, and the horses in the corral nickered softly in response. The creek burbled over smooth stones, the same sound that had lulled Delia to sleep on her first night in the valley and every night since. She closed her eyes and breathed it all in, committing this moment to memory. Not because she feared losing it, but because she wanted to remember exactly how it felt to be completely, utterly content. When she opened her eyes again, she found Xander watching her with that look he sometimes got, the one that said he still could not quite believe his luck. She smiled at him, and he smiled back, and no words were needed between them. They had started with a choice made in a moment of crisis, a stranger offering freedom to a desperate girl. From that single act of defiance, they had built a lifetime of love and joy and family. And as the fire burned down to embers and the stars wheeled overhead, as her children slept safe and warm, and her husband held her close, Delia knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice again, every single time. The end.